The shot cracked through the night like a whip, jerking Wyatt Callahan from his dreamless sleep. His hand found the Winchester before his feet hit the floor, a soldier's instinct that 15 years of peace hadn't dulled. Outside, the Texas moon hung low and full, painting silver across the yard where three shadowy figures circled his prized stallion. Wyatt's finger curled around the trigger, no hesitation, no warning. The rifle bucked against his shoulder, and one of the shadows dropped with a distinctly feminine cry. The other two bolted, hooves thundering into the darkness, abandoning their wounded companion without a backward glance. Loyalty's in short supply these days, Wyatt muttered, approaching the fallen figure with his rifle trained steady. She was Apache. That much was clear from her dress and the intricate beadwork at her collar. Blood seeped through fingers pressed against her shoulder, but her eyes, dark as midnight and twice as dangerous, showed no fear, only defiance. "Go ahead," she spat. "Finish it, white man." Wyatt lowered his rifle slightly. "You tried to steal my horse. Give me one good reason why I shouldn't." "I have none to give." Her voice, though strained with pain, carried a dignity that caught him off guard. "I would rather die free than be captured." Something in her words struck a chord deep within him. Without fully understanding why, Wyatt reached down and hoisted her to her feet. "My name's Wyatt Callahan, and you're bleeding all over my property. Let's fix that before you die on principle." By lamplight, Wyatt cleaned and bandaged the woman's wound. She devoured the stew he offered like someone who hadn't seen food in days, her eyes never leaving his hands, his gun, the door, calculating. "You have a name?" Wyatt finally asked. "Kiona." "Well, Kiona, most horse thieves I catch don't live to see morning. What makes you special enough to risk my hospitality?" She set down her spoon. "My tribe cast me out. 3 seasons, no child came from my womb. They call me barren soil, cursed. They tied me to a stake and left me for dead." Wyatt's face remained impassive, though his jaw tightened. "And the two who ran? Not my people. Outcasts like me. We found each other in the Badlands." "Loyal bunch," Wyatt remarked dryly. A ghost of a smile crossed her lips. "Survival makes for poor friendships." Wyatt stood, taking her empty bowl. A sliver of moonlight caught the long scar running from his temple to his jaw, a memento from Antietam, where he'd earned the nickname Ghost for his ability to disappear after taking a shot. 73 confirmed kills during the war, including a Confederate general at 800 yards, a record, they'd said. "Get some rest," he told her. "Morning comes early here." Fredericksburg hadn't changed much since Wyatt's last visit. The same dusty main street, the same suspicious glances from townspeople who preferred to leave a man with a reputation alone. He tied his horse outside the general store and stepped inside, his worn cavalry hat pulled low. "Wyatt Callahan," a familiar voice called. "Thought you might have died out in that wasteland you call home." Sheriff Thomas Parker stood by the counter, a tin star on his chest and 15 more years of hard living on his face. They'd served together at Shiloh before Wyatt was transferred to the sharpshooters. "Not dead yet, Tom," Wyatt replied, gathering supplies. "Just keeping to myself." Parker lowered his voice. "Heard about any Apache woman on the run? Word is she killed one of Marcus Finch's men. $500 bounty on her head." Wyatt's hand paused over a box of ammunition. "Finch? The land speculator?" "The very same. Been buying up every acre from here to the Rio Grande. Some say by force when money doesn't work." Parker studied his old friend. "You seen her?" "I mind my business, Tom. Suggest others do the same." Parker nodded slowly. "Fair enough. Just watch yourself. Jackson Reed and his boys are hunting her, and they don't care who gets in their way." "Nasty bunch." As Wyatt loaded his supplies, a well-dressed man watched from across the street. Marcus Finch's eyes narrowed as he observed the scarred veteran, then turned to a rugged man beside him. "Reed, I want that Apache woman found, and I want Callahan's land. His property is the key to controlling the water rights for the entire valley." Jackson Reed, a man with cold eyes and a reputation for brutality, nodded. "Consider it done, Mr. Finch." Wyatt noticed the signs immediately upon returning home. Disturbed dust patterns, broken twigs, horseshoe prints that hadn't been there that morning. Someone had been watching his property. Inside, Kiona sat by the fire, mending a torn shirt. Her wounded shoulder moved stiffly, but her hands worked with practiced precision. "You're hunted," Wyatt said without preamble, dropping his supplies on the table. She didn't look up. "I have been hunted since I drew first breath." "This is different. $500 different." Wyatt poured himself a whiskey. "They say you killed a man." Now she looked up, her dark eyes reflecting the firelight. "I did. Why?" "He tried to force himself on me. I buried my knife in his throat." No remorse colored her voice. "His friends will say I ambushed him. They will not mention what he tried to do." Wyatt downed his whiskey in one swallow, the burning in his throat matching the slow anger building inside him. Men like that reminded him why he'd left civilization behind. $500 would buy a lot of cattle, he mused. Kiona's shoulders stiffened, but she held his gaze. "Then why am I still breathing?" Wyatt walked to the gun rack and took down a weathered Colt revolver. "Because 500 isn't enough to make me betray my conscience." He placed the pistol on the table between them. "Can you shoot?" "Not with that," she admitted. "Then it's time you learned. They'll be coming soon." Outside, beyond the ridgeline, 12 riders gathered in the fading light. Jackson Reed cleaned his knife methodically as he addressed his men. "Tomorrow at dawn, boys, we take the Apache woman, kill Callahan if he interferes, and burn everything to the ground. Finch will pay extra for a thorough job." The Texas sun had barely crested the horizon when Wyatt positioned Kiona behind a fallen oak, 50 yards from the house. "Squeeze, don't pull," he instructed, adjusting her grip on the Colt. "Breathe out as you fire." Her first shot went wide. The second clipped the edge of the tin can he'd set up. By the 10th, she was hitting the target more often than not. "You're a quick study," Wyatt observed. "When survival depends on it, learning comes fast." She reloaded the way he'd shown her. "Why are you helping me? Your people and mine have been enemies for generations." Wyatt's eyes took on a distant look. "I've killed enough men to last several lifetimes. Most wearing uniforms different from mine, some wearing the same. After a while, you realize enemies are just men you haven't had coffee with yet." A cloud of dust on the horizon interrupted their conversation. 3 riders approached at a steady pace. "Get inside," Wyatt ordered, taking the Colt back and handing her his rifle instead. "If things go wrong, there's a loose floorboard under the bed. Ammunition and money. Run east toward the hills." The riders stopped 30 yards out, close enough to talk, far enough to react if things turned ugly. The leader, a man with a black hat and a face weathered by sun and violence, called out, "Callahan, name's Reed. I hear you're harboring something that doesn't belong to you." Wyatt stood on his porch, seemingly relaxed, though his hand hovered near his holster. "Everything on this property belongs to me, Reed. State of Texas says so." Reed sneered. "I'm talking about the Apache bitch who killed one of Finch's men. Hand her over. We'll be on our way. $500 for your trouble." "No one here but me," Wyatt replied. As Reed opened his mouth to respond, a shot rang out. The black hat flew from his head. A neat hole punched through its crown. The man hadn't even seen Wyatt draw. "Next one goes between your eyes," Wyatt said calmly. "Ride away while you still can." Reed's face contorted with rage, but he raised his hand slowly. "This isn't over, Callahan. Not by a long shot." "It never is," Wyatt agreed. As the riders disappeared into the dust, Kiona emerged from the house. They'll be back, with more men. I'm counting on it, Wyatt replied, holstering his pistol, which means we have work to do. Under cover of darkness, Wyatt and Kiona rode into Fredericksburg. The sheriff's office sat at the edge of town, a single lamp burning in the window. Parker looked up in surprise as they entered. You're either brave or foolish bringing her here, he said, eyeing Kiona warily. Maybe both, Wyatt acknowledged. What can you tell me about Finch? Parker glanced at the door before answering. He's found gold, not much, but enough to justify taking every piece of land in the valley. Those who won't sell have accidents. 3 homesteaders dead in the last month. And the law does nothing? Kiona asked sharply. The law, Parker said bitterly, is bought and paid for all the way to Austin. I'm just hanging on because somebody has to pretend there's justice left. He reached into his desk and pulled out a telegraph message. Army sending a detachment. Claims they're responding to Apache raids on settlers. There have been no raids, Kiona insisted. Finch's men dressed as Apache, Parker explained, attacked 2 families last week. The survivors gave very convincing testimonies. Wyatt's expression hardened. How long do we have? 3 days, maybe 4. When they arrive, they'll sweep through the entire territory. Your Apache friends in the hills won't stand a chance. Wyatt and Kiona exchanged glances. Then we'd better work fast, Wyatt said. They returned to find Wyatt's cattle slaughtered, the barn smoldering. A warning painted in blood across the corral fence read, "Next time it's you." Kiona knelt beside Wyatt's prize stallion, the animal breathing heavily from a deep gash in its flank. Wyatt reached for his pistol, but she stopped him. No, I can save him. Through the night, she worked with herbs and poultices, singing softly in her native tongue as she stitched the wound. By dawn, the horse stood shakily, and Wyatt found himself watching Kiona with newfound respect. Where did you learn that? My mother was a healer before the soldiers came. She taught me that every living thing deserves a chance to fight for its life. That evening, as they prepared for Reed's inevitable return, Wyatt opened a bottle of whiskey he'd been saving. I wasn't always a farmer, he said after his second drink. During the war, they called me Ghost. 73 confirmed kills. The number hung between them like a curse. Then I discovered they were using me to eliminate political enemies, not just military targets, men who spoke against the war, journalists who asked too many questions. He stared into his glass. I walked away, came here to forget, but some ghosts follow you no matter how far you run. Kiona listened silently, then said, My father, Chief Neshoba, signed a treaty with your government. 3 moons later, men like Finch forced us from the promised lands into the desert. My people believe I am cursed because I bear no children, but the true curse is believing the promises of those who see us as less than human. The fire crackled between them, 2 wounded souls finding unexpected common ground in a world that had shown them little mercy. The attack came at dawn, just as Wyatt predicted. Reed led 12 men toward the small farmhouse, confident in their numbers. What they didn't know was that Wyatt had spent 2 days preparing. The first trap, a tripwire connected to shotgun shells, took down 2 men instantly. The second, covered pit with sharpened stakes, claimed another. Wyatt's rifle cracked from a hidden position on the ridge, each shot finding its mark with deadly precision. Kiona fought with surprising ferocity, using the Colt with newfound skill and a hunting knife with lifelong expertise. Together, they whittled Reed's force down to 5, then 3, but Reed was smarter than he looked. While his men provided covering fire, he circled behind and cornered Kiona near the corral. His knife pressed against her throat as he dragged her into the open. Callahan, he shouted, show yourself or she dies. Wyatt's voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Let her go, Reed. You've lost half your men already. Then I've got nothing left to lose, Reed snarled, pressing the blade deeper. A single shot rang out from an impossible distance, over 600 yards. Reed collapsed, a bullet hole precisely centered between his eyes. Kiona stumbled forward, blood trickling from where the knife had nicked her skin. But their relief was short-lived. More riders appeared on the horizon. Not Reed's men, but Apache warriors. Faces painted for battle. At their lead rode a commanding figure wearing a headdress that marked him as a chief. Nashoba, Kiona whispered, recognition and fear mingling in her voice. The Apache warriors surrounded the farmhouse, arrows nocked and ready. Wyatt and Kiona stood back to back, outgunned and outmanned for the second time that day. Chief Nashoba dismounted, his weathered face revealing nothing as he approached his daughter. He spoke in their native tongue, his voice deep and resonant. "My father says they have been tracking me," Kiona translated, "but they also discovered Finch's men disguised as Apache, attacking settlers to provoke war." Nashoba continued speaking, gesturing toward Wyatt and then the horizon. "He says Finch has hired more men, and the soldiers are only 2 days' ride from here. He proposes—" Kiona hesitated, disbelief in her eyes. "He proposes an alliance, his warriors and you, against Finch and his men." Wyatt studied the chief carefully, then looked at Kiona. "Can he be trusted?" "My father has many faults," she replied, "but he has never broken his word once given." Wyatt nodded slowly and extended his hand to Nashoba. "Tell him we have a common enemy." As the chief clasped Wyatt's forearm in the traditional warrior's grip, a new chapter in the frontier's bloody history began to unfold. The plan was simple but dangerous. While Wyatt and the Apache warriors raided Reed's camp to eliminate Finch's hired guns, Sheriff Parker would gather evidence of Finch's criminal activities. Kiona, who could move most freely between worlds, would infiltrate Finch's office to find the forged documents and falsified claims. Under the cover of night, Wyatt led the assault on Reed's camp. The Apache moved like shadows, and Wyatt's marksmanship provided deadly support from the ridgeline. By midnight, Reed's remaining men had either fled or surrendered. Meanwhile, Kiona slipped into Finch's office in town. She found what they needed: proof of bribes to officials, orders for attacks on settlers while disguised as Apache, and land deeds obtained through coercion and murder. But as she prepared to leave, the door opened. Finch himself entered, a pistol in his hand. "I suspected someone might come," he said smoothly. "I didn't expect it to be you, my dear." Kiona backed away, clutching the documents. "Your plan has failed. The army will know the truth." Finch laughed. "The army follows orders, and orders come from men who appreciate progress and profit. Your primitive people and that scarred relic Callahan are standing in the way of civilization." He raised his pistol, but Kiona moved with the speed and grace of someone raised in the harsh demands of survival. She ducked beneath his aim, drove her knife into his thigh, and escaped through the window with the documents. She didn't see Reed, wounded but alive, watching from the shadows. Kiona rode hard toward the rendezvous point, where Wyatt waited with her father's warriors. The documents tucked safely inside her shirt would expose Finch's plot and potentially stop the coming massacre. A shot rang out. Pain exploded in her side as she tumbled from her horse. Reed stood over her, blood seeping from his poorly bandaged head, wound where one of Wyatt's bullets had grazed him earlier. "You cost me everything," he growled, aiming his revolver at her face. "Now I'll take something from Callahan before Finch's new men arrive to finish the job." Miles away, Wyatt sensed something wrong when Kiona didn't appear at the appointed time. Following tracks only he could see in the dim moonlight, he located her horse, then followed the blood trail to where Reed held her at gunpoint. The distance was extreme, nearly 700 yards with a gusting crosswind that would push any bullet off course. Worse, Reed stood directly over Kiona, making a clean shot nearly impossible without risking her life. Wyatt steadied his breathing, calculated the wind, adjusted for the distance, and remembered every lesson that had earned him his ghostly reputation during the war. One shot, one chance. The rifle cracked like thunder in the night. Reed collapsed without a sound, the bullet having entered just behind his ear, the only angle that guaranteed Keona's safety. Wyatt ran to her side. The wound was serious but not fatal. "Hold on," he urged, lifting her onto his horse. "Just hold on." By dawn, word had spread throughout Fredericksburg. Finch, enraged by the raid on Reed's camp and the theft of his documents, gathered every hired gun he could find and took over the town. Sheriff Parker, caught trying to send a telegraph to the army with the truth, was beaten and locked in his own jail. Wyatt, Keona, and the Apache warriors arrived to find the town under siege. Finch's men had barricaded the main street, using terrified townspeople as human shields. "This ends now," Wyatt told Neshoba through Keona. "We need to draw them out, away from the innocents." The chief nodded, issuing orders to his warriors. Half circled behind the town while others created diversions on the flanks. Wyatt, his rifle ready, took position on the church steeple with a clear view of the entire street. When the attack came, it was swift and coordinated. The Apache warriors struck from multiple directions, forcing Finch's men to divide their attention. Wyatt's rifle eliminated key targets with surgical precision: gunmen in windows, snipers on rooftops, anyone trying to harm the civilians. Keona, despite her wound, led a small group that freed Parker and the other prisoners. The sheriff, bloodied but unbowed, joined the fight with a shotgun in his hands and justice in his heart. Finch, seeing his forces crumbling, made a desperate move. He grabbed a young woman and dragged her into the street, using her as a shield while backing toward the bank. "It's over." "Callahan," he shouted, knowing Wyatt could hear from his perch. "You think this changes anything? I have friends in the capital who'll make sure this valley is mine, one way or another." From his position, Wyatt had no shot. The woman blocked any clear angle to Finch, but as he watched, another figure appeared behind Finch. Keona, moving silently despite her injury, the knife in her hand catching the morning light. With one swift motion, she disabled Finch's gun arm. The woman broke free, and Wyatt's bullet found its mark before Finch could recover. The remaining hired guns, seeing their employer fall, threw down their weapons. As the dust settled over Fredericksburg, the Army detachment arrived to find an unexpected scene. Settlers and Apache working together to rebuild damaged structures, tend to the wounded, and bury the dead. The documents recovered from Finch's office, combined with testimony from townspeople who had witnessed his crimes, painted a clear picture of corruption and manufactured conflict. The commanding officer, a pragmatic man who had seen enough bloodshed in the recent war, recognized an opportunity for peace where his superiors had demanded battle. After consulting with Parker, Wyatt, and Chief Neshoba, he agreed to report that the Apache raids had been falsified and to honor the original treaty boundaries. At the edge of town, Wyatt watched as Keona spoke with her father. The chief's face remained stern, but his eyes held a new respect for his daughter. "He has asked me to return to the tribe," she told Wyatt afterward. "He says a woman who has shown such courage deserves her place among our people." Wyatt nodded, feeling an unexpected tightness in his chest. "You should go. Family is something worth holding on to." "I will," she said, "but on my terms. I will be a bridge between our worlds, not a prisoner of either." She stood before him, no longer the desperate thief he'd caught stealing his horse, but a warrior who had earned her place in a harsh world. Wyatt removed the Colt revolver from his belt and offered it to her. "For protection, the world still has plenty of men like Reed and Finch." Keona accepted the weapon, then pressed something into his hand, a small leather pouch decorated with intricate beadwork. "To ward off the ghosts that haunt you, we all deserve peace, Wyatt Callahan." Weeks later, Wyatt stood on his porch, watching the sunset paint the western sky in shades of fire. The damage to his farm had been repaired, his cattle replaced with help from grateful townspeople. In the distance, the hills where Neshoba's tribe had established their new camp were just visible against the horizon. Hoofbeats announced Parker's arrival. The sheriff dismounted with a grunt, his bruises still evident but healing. "Thought you might want to know," Parker said, accepting a cup of coffee. "There's a new gang operating across the Mexican border. Army stretched too thin to handle it." Wyatt raised an eyebrow. "And this concerns me because you're bored out of your mind playing farmer," Parker replied with a knowing smile. "And because they're terrorizing settlements on both sides of the border, including some Apache villages." Wyatt's hand drifted to the small medicine pouch he now wore at his belt. He thought of Kiona, of promises made and debts still unpaid. "I thought I might finally get some peace and quiet," he said, retrieving his rifle from its place beside the door. Parker chuckled. "Men like you don't get peace, Wyatt. Too many wolves, too few hunters." As the sheriff rode away, Wyatt began checking his gear. His eyes turned once more to the western hills, and for a moment he thought he saw a lone figure watching from the ridge. Then it was gone, like a ghost in the gathering dusk. "Time to hunt," he whispered, and prepared his horse for the long ride south.